Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. Today we have a manga review of chapter 889, The Last Stand. And we have finally made it. The moment of cake eatery we've been waiting for so long is imminent. As Perospero very nicely stated, the fate of the Big Mom Pirates is now entirely at the mercy of how amazing this wedding cake tastes. And as it should, this is causing untold chaos all across Totland, which is just incredibly satisfying to see. Considering how confident and smug all of the Big Mom Pirates have been during this arc, it is now actually fantastic to see them in a state of imminent destruction. With that said, I think we have a fairly clear path from here though. She's going to eat the cake, be absolutely delighted, and probably become unconscious just like she did in her flashback on her birthday, thus barely saving the asses of all of the Big Mom Pirates. The only thing we have yet to see is if Sanji will be revealed to be the chef behind this creation. And I feel like he will be, which will essentially lead the Big Mom Pirates to consider Sanji their savior, which puts them in a really odd spot because the Straw Hats are more or less also responsible for all of the destruction caused so far, including the collapse of Whole Cake Chateau and the defeat of two sweet commanders. Now I want to jump right into the end of this chapter with the appearance of Aladeen and his surprisingly troublesome looking cohort. That last panel featuring all of them is probably my favorite piece of artwork in the entire chapter. Aladeen just looks badass in the foreground, with all of these amazing and unique looking fishmen behind him, along with the very cute looking Praline, as well as Wadatsumi lurking in the background, a shade darker than the rest. Yeah, I just love everything about this panel. So I knew that these guys were more than likely going to have further involvement in the arc, but my god, is it glorious to see Wadatsumi emerging from the ocean and absolutely wrecking the Big Mom pirate fleet. It's also really interesting because on Fishman Island, Wadatsumi faced off against both Jinbei and Sanji, and now here he is, roughly a billion chapters later, directly helping both of them. It's one of those nice little reminders that every character and every event in One Piece just keeps consistently building into great moments of payoff for the future. Speaking of great moments, Sanji has a pretty damn fine one during this chapter where he blocks Daifuku's giant genie. And there's also a wonderful panel where Daifuku just looks like he is furiously jerking off, and you know what, in effect, that's exactly what he's doing. It seems the more he rubs, the bigger the genie gets. And sadly, that is not a euphemism. Although if we continue with the masturbation metaphor, it makes me wonder if there is a limit to how big he can make the genie before he climaxes. Whatever the case, I think that Sanji's involvement with Daifuku will be short-lived, possibly even condensed to just this moment. This instance is probably akin to when Sanji got in a kick on Oven, a situational attack that is unlikely to result in an actual fight, which once again is a shame for Sanji, especially because his siblings got their own amazing moments in the last chapter. So the fight against Daifuku will probably be left to one of our new challengers who appeared this week, and you know what? I'm thinking that it simply has to fall to Aladdin. I mean, Aladdin versus the genie is just too good not to happen. So here's something that I feel is very easy to skip over this week, and that is the fact that Stussy and Morgans are now missing. And Mondor is quite rightfully afraid of the implications of this. I mean, I've been saying this for a while, but an agent of the world government and the owner of the world's most widespread news source is a very powerful combination. Stussy will more than likely forcibly push Morgans to produce an article fitting the agenda of the world government, and in fact, I think she may have even gone so far as to abduct Morgans. He probably hasn't fled of his own free will, at least not when there's so much more potential big news to be had. Oh, and another absolutely huge thing that was just kind of skimmed over this chapter is that the Nostra Castello has been destroyed. And that hits me pretty hard, actually, because I really loved the design of that ship. I mean, it's no real issue for the Fire Tank Pirates because they can just live inside Capone. Actually, I take that back. It's a pretty big issue because now they need a new ship to escape Totland properly. But I am glad to some degree that the consequences of angering a Yonko are continuing. Nobody can leave Totland unscathed. That would just be too absurd in the context of the world that has been built. Moving on, the best moment of this chapter has to be Luffy mistaking Judge's insults about Sanji for compliments. It's such a classic Luffy thing to do, and it feels like an appropriate summary of this whole Sanji crisis arc. Although I feel like Judge's feelings might change once Big Mom eats the wedding cake and he realizes just how powerful the ability to cook can be. Basically, Sanji, on his own, will be responsible for knocking out one of the 4 emperors. A power that the Germa could never dream of. And hey, that might lead to something very cool. For example, if the Germa ever got a cover story, I can imagine Judge, having been stunned by the power of the cake, investing a lot into the science of cooking, and even creating a legion of Germa chefs as a result of Sanji. And something else that I think is worth mentioning is that this is the second chapter in a row where we have not had an update on Pekoms, which is kind of personally frustrating considering that he was about to become a badass Sulong boss. This is more than likely a very intentional storytelling move by Oda though. I can imagine that somewhere soon down the track the final page of a chapter will feature Sulong Pekoms appearing behind someone like Oven or Smoothie in a huge oh shit moment. And it will be made even better because a lot of the readers will have probably forgotten that he was ever there. Kind of like Wadatsumi appearing this chapter, but even more satisfying. And now something we simply cannot ignore is that next week will be the 900th chapter of One Piece. What an absurdly monumental achievement. When I started reading the series many moons ago, we were just approaching 400, which at the time felt like a ridiculous amount in itself. I never even dreamt that we would reach the 900 chapter mark and still have so much more story to tell. But here we are, and I can't wait to see what the 900s hold for us. Considering it's such a huge milestone, I think that a lot of people are expecting something absolutely epic to happen, but we may want to temper our expectations. There's a bit of an urban myth within the community that the 100 chapter milestones usually contain some sort of earth-shaking revelation or story progression, which is true for some but not so much overall. The most prominent examples are chapter 100 where the Straw Hats officially left East Blue and entered the Grand Line. Then I guess there's also chapter 500 which introduced Rayleigh, and chapter 800 where the Straw Hat Grand Fleet was formed. But for the rest of them, they're just kind of your stock standard regular One Piece chapters. So as amazing as it is, I'm not going to expect something too earth-shaking to happen next week, which I guess will just make it all the more exciting if it actually does. And that pretty much does it for chapter 889. If you enjoyed this video, then feel free to like, favorite, or subscribe, and please do comment with your thoughts on the chapter. This has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.